We are live. This is Emil Fisher with a very special episode of the BCTL podcast. Today's episode is in collaboration with Aces Jiu Jitsu Club. I'm going to be doing a write-up after we're done here. Today's guest is I think one of the best ambassadors for the Jiu Jitsu community, Sean Patrick Flanery. He is an actor who has done numerous roles. I think you're probably best known for Powder and Boondock Saints. I'd say that those are probably the two best known pieces. How are you doing today, Sean?
I'm doing good, brother. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course, man. Of course. So you have a movie coming out called Born a Champion. When does that come out? And let's talk a little bit about it.
Comes out January 22nd, which it's that's a week. It's Saturday. I'm so time is a blur right now because I'm in quarantine. I'm in Toronto and I'm halfway through it. I'm at my first week, so I have not left this vessel right here for 7 days.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, but it comes out a week from yesterday, Friday, and it goes to select theaters, obviously because of the virus. Some cities are more open than others, but it's coming to a couple hundred theaters throughout the area. And on the same day, the entertainment industry is undergoing a kind of a revolution that now it goes to theaters and it streams on the same day. So on the 22nd, you can see it, on demand or Apple TV or anywhere you stream your movies and in select theaters. So yeah, Friday, man, comes out Friday.
That's awesome, man. So this movie, you got it's you, Dennis Quaid. I'm drawing a blank on the gentleman that played Louis Armstrong.
Reno Wilson, man. Reno Wilson.
Yeah, Reno Wilson.
Man. He is amazing, man. He played Louis Armstrong, and if you haven't seen it, man, you need to check it out because one of the best humans I've ever met, man. That's a solid dude and an incredible actor.
That's awesome, man. Now, you placed a great focus on jiu-jitsu for this movie. I think you described it as your love letter to jiu-jitsu. Is this the first time that you've used jiu-jitsu in a movie?
Yeah, in any significant way, yeah. And it is my love letter to jiu-jitsu. It's when you try and quantify your life and what things have played a bigger role than others, a larger percentage of who I am came from a jiu-jitsu mat than just about everything else put together. Obviously outside of people or family, but and that's not an overstatement.
Yeah.
When I found jiu-jitsu, it really forced me into a course correction and a recalibration that may have never happened without it. It's just, I don't frivolously throw that out there, but it's that important in my life.
It's funny. There's another movie that just recently came out called Jiu Jitsu. Have you seen it?
I haven't, man, but I'm a Nick Cage fan, and I heard I was looking forward to it, and then I found out it was about like some kind of weird space jujitsu, or I don't know. I don't know. I watched the trailer that everybody watched, and I just was like, what? Why the fuck is this called jujitsu? But I mean, I'm sure it's a great film, but I think everybody, because of the title, was expecting it to be our love and our backyard, that jujitsu. I don't know what they meant by that title, but the trailer kind of left me scratching my head.
Yeah. We've got one of your fans here, Steffi Schmidt, who asked 3 questions on here. What I like to do when we do these live interviews, I like to give people a chance to ask questions. So Steffi Schmidt asked, what's your favorite line from Born a Champion that you wrote? If you have one.
Man. One of them is a prayer. And Steffi, all the way from Germany. I'd imagine it's the middle of the night for you, Steffi. So thank you for tuning in. One of them is a prayer. And I also wrote, I call it the meritocracy speech, where it talks about the jiu-jitsu mat, where there is no bell curve. It'll expose every lie that you've been trying to hide. It'll confirm every truth that you've been professing, and that there's nowhere to hide on a jiu-jitsu match. But really, most of my favorite lines are lines I have with my kids, and probably my favorite moment in the entire movie is after the credits roll. So if you guys do watch the film, stick around for the credits, because that's some of my favorite stuff. Emil, did we lose you?
Here, I'm right here. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
I know that you included your son in the movie. Do you have a couple of kids, right?
I do, and the main character's name is Mickey Kelly, and he has a son, and I have two boys. I actually rewrote the role whenever we got financing to actually make the film, to incorporate the character's son being portrayed at two separate ages. So it is a time lapse. It goes to 4 years later. So the first incarnation of Mickey Kelly's son is at 6 years old, and it's played by my youngest son, Porter Flanery. And then at 8 years old, he's played by my older son, Charlie Flanery. So it's and
so you got both your sons in the movie.
Yeah, both of my boys are in the film, man. It was cool, man. It was cool.
Was this the first time you got to have your sons in a movie with you?
Yeah, absolutely. It is their acting debut and their acting retirement all in one film.
Oh wow!
I'm not trying,
no child actors.
No child actors. They're gonna spend their time being kids and getting up to nonsense. But because it was Daddy's movie, that and obviously they travel with me, so it was a neat opportunity to get them on camera doing what they love as well. Being in jiu-jitsu and being my boys.
Now, you'll have to forgive me. I follow you, but I don't really understand the path that you've gone. I know that you were in LA and you had your academy in LA, Hollywood BJJ, and now you're in, I believe, Houston, and you have a Hollywood BJJ in Houston. Am I correct in that understanding?
Yeah.
Now you have two locations?
Yeah. Opened up Hollywood BJJ. Yeah, opened up Hollywood BJJ in 2004. And about 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago, my parents got sick. So I bought a house in Houston, which is where I grew up, went to university and everything. And we took the family to Houston. And subsequently, I opened up a facility that's on my property, actually.
Oh, wow.
So we train, in essence, we train in my backyard. And I'll give you, when I say it's in my backyard, that's kind of shocking a little bit, but this is in my backyard.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's, it's 600 square feet of mat, wall mats. It's got pull-up bars, undulation ropes. It's a full academy in my backyard.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's funny. We have a mutual acquaintance in Neto Gomez.
Yeah, of course, man.
Believe it or not, Neto Gomez. I took a bunch of time off jiu-jitsu when I started training again. Neto was one of my first instructors back.
He's a good dude, big dude too, man.
Big, strong guy. There was a picture that came up from a couple of years ago on my Facebook memories of me training with Neto, and he's a big, strong guy. Such a nice guy too. On top of that, just quick shout out to your
wonderful
instructor.
Good. Yeah, Neto's a great guy. Amazing instructor, amazing competitor, a wealth of jiu-jitsu knowledge, and a dude you do not want to be stuck underneath of.
No, his wrist locks, man. His wrist locks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the academy in Texas, how's that growing? And is that I know you also have spent a bit of time training with the Henzo Gracie affiliation down there as well. So how's training been going? Have you been training at all during this coronavirus quarantine?
Yeah, yeah. Training's going great. I mean, I don't a sunset couple for Cleveland, right at the gourmet burger place. That's funny, man. I just read that type in.
Not
Yeah,
easy.
training's
Not
going
easy.
great. It's funny about having a facility, on your property. Everybody that all of my students are heavily vetted. They got to come recommended. I need to, know somebody that knows them because it's on my property. So it's a very different prospect than running an actual business and trying to attain the maximum student count. It's a very different business model. And, we have a kids class and we have an adults class. And whenever I have a consultation, it's about who's going to make my mat better. It has nothing to do with the student count or the bank account. It's who is going to make the mat better for me and my existing students. That's it. So it's a heavy vetting process, and we're very selective on who we allow to train, and that's not for any other reason than it's in my backyard. So
Yeah, you don't want crazies coming through.
yeah, not at all. And there's no just come in and drop in for a day because you're parking in my driveway, and so but we got a great student base. We got a great group of adults. We got a great group of kids, and it's at the end of the day, jiu-jitsu is there's a big part of my legacy. So it's what I want to leave behind. One of the most valuable things that I can leave with my boys, my kids. So. I'm pretty protective of it.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I didn't realize it was actually on your property. That's got to be wild for you to be able to, wake up, walk down the driveway, go to your academy.
Yeah, it is. And, sometimes, the boys will have a question. They're like, Daddy, what is that thing? We'll go, let's go out to the red mat. We go out to the red mat and we drill it. It's cool. It's really cool.
So let's talk a little bit more about your movie. So you wrote, I'm assuming you also were involved in the direction of it as well. Like, what was your, how involved were you in the production process of it?
Incredibly involved. Obviously this is a passion project of mine. I wrote this back in 2007, and I was lying in bed and I wrote it. And one of the most talented producers I know, I met him on Boondock Saints. His name is Paul Alessi. And I woke up the next morning and I sent him the story. I woke up the next day and I flushed the whole story out top to bottom. And I sent him the story. And he read it and he called me right back and he said, brother, we got to make this into a film. And it took us that long, from 2007 to 2019, and until Lucas Oil, a racing oil company, Forrest Lucas, who started Lucas Oil, read the script, and his son, Morgan Lucas, and they fell in love with the script, and they decided to give us the opportunity to make the movie. So it took that long. The gestation process was that long, but it's that long that it's been in the cooker. But yeah, myself and Paul were actively involved in every aspect of this because it's it's very different than, being a gun for hire as an actor. As an actor, you show up, you say somebody else's words, and then you go home. But this was from inception, alone in my bed, all the way to the final editing and delivering a final product in a way that you're happy with. So really, Paul was right next to me the whole time, and I'm very grateful for Forrest Lucas, Morgan Lucas, Paul Alessi for seeing it realized, and the entire cast and crew. I could not have made this without them. I mean, I made some request phone calls to some big names like Reno Wilson, and he showed up and he joined me. Like Dennis Quaid, and he showed up and he joined me. Katrina Bowden, and she showed up and joined me. Edson Barbosa, Henzo Gracie, Mickey Gall. Some of these guys, I just reached out and they showed up, as well as a lot of the players. Ruben, the DP, I think, shot amazing footage It's we just had an incredible collection of talented people. This is in no way is this a one-man show at all. It took a lot of people to do a lot of things right, and I'm incredibly grateful, and I'm really proud of the final product.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny if you look at, you know, movies that exist about jujitsu. You got your documentaries like Choke, and you got, you know, a couple other things that have come out. Then you got, you know, stuff like Red Belt, which is kind of like a philosophical milieu, which, you know, has its mixed reviews, but I think overall was a net good. But I feel like this is a different kind of piece, just from the trailer.
Yeah, you know, I mean, comparing movies, it's like, you know, comparing people. They have their different origin, they have their different life supply, and you know, I like movies. This is a story that I wanted to tell about the things that are, you know, that have moved me the most in life, and it's something that I found that, not an understatement again, but it changed my life. And so I really wanted to incorporate that. But at the end of the day, you know, the entertainment industry doesn't give a shit about your passion about a martial art. It gives a shit about story. So to make it work, if it's not a story worth telling, nobody cares. So it's wrapped up in a love story, to be honest. And the backdrop is something that I feel pretty strongly about, jiu-jitsu. And leaving a good version of that behind. So I hope it's received in the same way.
For sure, man. Now, when you reached out to people and were like, "I'm doing this passion piece about jujitsu," was most of the reaction positive, or did you have any challenges along the way?
Oh my God, there's challenges along the way every time you make a movie, but
for sure,
you know, when I reached out, a lot of people don't know what jiu-jitsu is. I mean, they just thought it was a martial arts film. Like, oh wow, you're a black belt. That's great. You know, my daughter, she's 4. She's a black belt too. You're like, yeah, it's the same thing. You know, you don't even bother explaining to them the difference. It's you know, so you know, to get a film made, it's not like there are people that are privy to what Brazilian jiu-jitsu is. They have no idea. So they base it on the merit of the story. They could care less if it's about snooker, if it's about cricket, if it's about badminton. If it's an amazing story, or if they think it's an amazing story, then they will put money behind it to get it made. But my God, was there trials and tribulations? Were there hurdles to get over? Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Yeah, there was. And luckily enough, we had the legs to leap and leap high.
Well, what do you, as far as, you know, was there any moment where you were like, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect this kind of, you know, struggle or this kind of success. Was there anything unexpected about the process for you? Because I know you're seasoned. You've been around, you know, you've been around as an actor my entire life. So you've been around it. Was there anything that was like, God damn, I didn't expect it to be like that? Either way.
Man, everything in movie making. I mean, the movie is in my brain. I wrote this in bed. So I can write a story about, for example, a city that looks like X, Y, or Z, but finding that city is a different thing. If the only city you can find looks like ABC, you got to rewrite that shit to take place in a city ABC. So there's so many things on the day that, you know, we had to make tiny, minute adjustments that didn't stray from the story. But I mean, if you can't think on your feet and be pliable, it's the wrong industry. I mean, you know, you go in with your dream cast, and if you don't get them, you have to have a second and a third choice. Now, luckily enough, we got almost across the board our dream cast on the first go round. So yeah, in that respect, it was kind of amazing and mind-boggling. But man, there's so many. Movie making is one big hurdle. I mean, if you have one hurdle a day, you're not even being tested. I mean, every single day, there are things that simply won't work, and you got to change it because you can't come back for another day. If you
it's like
if you have Exactly. You can't go back. You can't go, oh, that guy passed my guard. Now he's in side control. Let's go back to guard. Let me try something else. No, the motherfucker's already mounting. You know, it's like that. It's like you have to have a game plan, and you have to have alternatives for if something works, if something doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure, man. Now, I was going to ask you, so when you were, when you wrote the film and then when you actually executed the film, choreography, how much of it did you do as far as the choreography goes? And how much of the, choreography was done by a choreographer? And how much were you involved in that process? Because I feel like jiu-jitsu, interestingly, while it's one of the most effective martial arts, when done properly, it can be quite uninteresting to watch.
You hit the nail on the head. So in answer, 100%. I'm a stunt coordinator. I designed, I choreographed everything. And yes, there are some new school types of jiu-jitsu that are incredibly dynamic. And on the grand scale, even the most dynamic movements in jiu-jitsu are fairly less appealing to watch than, say, a
punch.
Kung fu, or it's or some highly dynamic taekwondo kicks, but it is very authentic, and I really wanted it to be old school, ugly, methodical jiu-jitsu. My first jiu-jitsu class was at the Hicks and Gracie Academy, so the jiu-jitsu that I fell in love with, and the jiu-jitsu whose arms were open to me and pulled me into its embrace, are the old school variety. And it is probably the ugliest to watch, but it's what's in the heart. And this story also takes place in the 90s. So there was no berimbolo whenever this film took place. There was, back when I wrote it in 2007, I mean, everybody knew the De La Hiva back take, but it wasn't called a berimbolo. Like, there wasn't, I didn't even hear the word berimbolo until, 2010 maybe, or something like that? It's,
2010, 2011.
Yeah, something like that. So this was when jiu-jitsu first came to America. And I remember, everybody watched UFC 1, November 23rd, 1993. And everybody, all the untrained eye, they just saw some guy in a gi kind of fall on top of another guy, and then the guy on the bottom gave up. And people were like, what the fuck happened? I didn't even see it. It's not even impressive. I believe that guy tapped and he wanted out, but why? You couldn't even see it happen. So we try to make it a little bit more visible, but it is an honest display of real jiu-jitsu.
That's awesome. Now, when you were choreographing this, I know a while ago I had Stephen Kepfer on. Have you ever heard of Sambo Steve?
No.
So Stephen Kepfer is he's a Sambo guy from New York City, and he has been involved in a lot of fight choreography. He was involved in some of the fight choreography for John Wick. He was involved in some of it for Ray Donovan. And one thing that I thought that was interesting was he was talking about, real action versus movie action, how certain angles have to be cut, certain things have to be done. And was there any technique that you found specific that was difficult to choreograph, that was difficult to put in the movie? Like anything that you wanted to put in that you saw it afterwards or like, I don't know.
Nah, we did it. We choreographed. We shot it. And this is another thing that, when you make a movie on a shoestring budget, you don't have the option to shoot it 15 times. And that's why, the people that I cast in the film, Edson Barbosa, he may be a black belt now, but he was a brown belt at the time. So he's a very well-skilled ground guy. Needless to say, on the feet, he's elite beyond elite. Yeah. So to choreograph those things with somebody that spent, he spent 20-something, 30 years of his life striking. It's like when you hire somebody like that, we talked about it. Our rehearsal was me saying, you're going to do this. I'm going to counter with this. I'm going to do this takedown. Then you're going to do this clinch. You're going to strike here. You're going to reverse with it. And then we just did it. And when you're talking with Edison Barbosa, you don't have to rehearse it. He understands. He hears me. He goes, okay, you're going to do that sweep. Then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to get up here. And then I'm going to strike here. And we just shot it. And I'm not exaggerating when I say we did just about everything one time. I'm not kidding.
That's awesome.
We did everything, one time, and we shot it, and that's what we had. We didn't have the option to go back and do it 15 times.
Did you teach any of your other castmates, the people that you brought on, did you teach them anything for it? Like, did you, were you on the mat with Dennis Quaid? That's really what I want to know.
I won't give that away, but I will say John Kowalski, who's a very dear friend of mine. He's also an HBJJ black belt. And so I've spent 15 years on the mat rolling with Johnny K. And I put him in the movie. And so we have a couple of great grappling scenes. And, you're talking about, and the same thing with him. Like, for example, when we shot it, we didn't rehearse it. I just said, this is what we're going to do. You're going to shoot. You're going to do a blast double. Then I'm going to counter with this. I'm going to do this. And, he was like, okay, go for it, because I'm going to try to defend. And we actually just rolled with these basic rudimentary pieces of choreography. And it's very real. It's, and he comes from a wrestling background. So we just basically clapped hands and went with a basic outline, and we shot it.
Did you find that any of the actors that you brought on, had an unexpected jiu-jitsu background? Like, I know sometimes people have trained and they just don't talk about it, and then you find out that that they're also a brown belt or a black belt or something. Did you experience it? Did you encounter anything like that?
No, nobody had any experience in jiu-jitsu. I mean, outside of the people that,
right.
Obviously, I made a phone call to somebody that's very special in my life. I got my black belt under the Henzo Gracie lineage, and I made a phone call to Henzo, and then he was on set in a week. So awesome. Outside of people like that, who I think everybody knows is, the Michael Jordan of jiu-jitsu, no, nobody surprised me. But it's something that I think that everybody's a little bit interested in. It's I fell in love with it, and I didn't think my attraction to it was unique or bizarre or weird. And I think every time somebody discovers it, they kind of call me a month later going, "Oh my God, I'm addicted to this." Like, it's and it's good to hear that I wasn't wrong in my initial assessment when I found it.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when somebody starts to do it, how important it becomes to them. So I guess that's really special. Now, I'm assuming from seeing the trailers, you probably filmed it before COVID. Am I correct?
We did. We shot it in mid-June to early July of 2019. Brian Cunningham says your fro is righteous.
It's one of my buddies and students. So you were saying, I'm sorry, you were saying.
2019. We shot it in June, July of 2019. And that's how long the editing process takes. We shot it then, and it's just coming out now, January 22nd.
Was the process in any way affected by the pandemic?
I mean, if you're talking about the filming process, no. I mean, we were done long before. I'm sorry?
I'm talking about like after, like the editing. Sorry, the editing, the release, the marketing.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
I mean, for example, like right now, it's coming to select theaters. The only reason there's that word select is because some of the theaters aren't open. Like right now in California, I don't know where it's going to play, but there's a ton of theaters in Texas. There's a ton of theaters in Florida, but select theaters because the only theaters that are open are select theaters. And that's why it's coming out all at the same time. You can stream rent it at the same time you can go to a theater and see it, because if they just limited it to theaters that were actually open, it'd be in very few theaters. So, yeah, it's affected everything. I mean, COVID has affected absolutely everything. And we're dealing with it the best way possible. And I hope it doesn't deter people from trying to check it out.
I mean, I almost feel like the fact that it's available on demand immediately is going to increase the viewership, but it might decrease the amount of potential money it can make. I don't know. I don't know much about that side of things.
Yeah, you may be right. I mean, at the end of the day, I want, you know, I want to make my wife and my kids proud. I want it to be something that they would hand off to somebody else and say, hey, my dad made this, you know. It's so, you know, I hope the jiu-jitsu community appreciates it, because I honestly wrote it from my heart. And I hope people like it. I hope people like it more than the end all box office. And, you know, there's a smaller group of people whose opinions that I really want to come out in a positive way than just the general public is box office numbers. But you know, you always have a list of people who you hope really enjoy it, and a large percentage of that list is in the jiu-jitsu community.
Now we still have a couple more questions from Steffi Schmidt left last night. So Steffi was also asking, do you think an actor needs a mature personality? Does he have to know / understand himself, who he really is to be a good actor? Or do you search parts of yourself in every role to understand yourself better?
You know, all of the above. I think you need to understand yourself to do well in anything, in just general life. I think you have to know your strengths, your weaknesses. You know, I don't think it's possible to put something on screen that you can't at least imagine you being or you possessing. I don't think there are any made up emotions. I think you have to be able to access those, you know, with immediacy and accuracy and authenticity. And I don't know that that's incredibly rare, and I don't know that it can be taught. I think knowing yourself is of paramount importance in any endeavor, much less the film industry. And I think that's one of the purposes of life, is finding out exactly who you are. And one of the best about not movie making, but this martial art has held a mirror up to me every time I clap hands and step on a mat. And that's one of the best ways to find out who you are and what you're capable of.
For sure, man. That's a great way of putting it. I do think that you're absolutely correct that you need that self-awareness and that maturity to do anything well. But yeah, for sure. Was this role that you played in the movie easier for you than other movies because of the fact that it was so important to you?
Yeah, it was. You know, first of all, I don't want to pull the curtain back and show you a wizard that lets you down, but I don't find acting difficult. I've had real jobs, man. I threw newspapers when I was 8. You couldn't get a paper route unless you were 13. So I went to a kid that lived on the cul-de-sac, and I said, hey man, if you sign up for a paper route, you know, I'll throw them and I'll give you 20% of the money. You don't have to do anything. So he signed up, and I threw papers for 5 years before I was too young. I've had real jobs, man. I know what they are. This is not a real job. I define a real job as something you wouldn't do unless they pay you money. And this is the only industry I've ever experienced where people are traveling 3,000 miles from home, find Craigslist, and finding a way to do it for free in hopes that someone will see you do it and eventually pay you to do it again. It's the only job I've ever come across in which that takes place. So I'd love to say I mean, there are certainly other aspects of filmmaking that are very, very difficult. But the process of acting, I don't find difficult. And look, maybe it's because I'm shitty at it. I don't know. Maybe the people that do it incredibly. Look. Maybe there's people that do it so well that's why. Maybe there's people that go, well, you suck. You're not really going to that place. That's why it's easy for you. I'm saying the most extreme examples, of a characterization that I've done, where the emotion you really have to pull it out. I don't find that to be on the spectrum of what I would call difficult. Like I said, I've had real jobs. I've had real jobs that are difficult, and nothing in acting do I find difficult. It's at the end of the day, you have a trailer with craft service and a bowl of M&Ms anytime you want them. It's crazy.
So I'm not entirely certain I understand this question, but I figure I'd just air it anyways. Sean, do you, in acting or in life, have periods where your emotions are as accessible to you as you would have liked? Do you understand the question?
I don't know, but I'll give you the answer to how I interpret it. Quite the contrary. In my life, sometimes my emotions are more accessible than I'd like them to be. Sometimes it's very good to be able to manage your emotions. And sometimes your emotions are so strong, they become unmanageable. And there are certain times in my life where I haven't been able to keep my emotions at bay. Maybe that's one of the reasons that they are readily accessible when you need them on camera. But the downside is sometimes they run rampant. And, God didn't give us a leash for them, You have to call them back and hope they listen and come.
So shifting gears a little bit from acting back to jiu-jitsu, my buddy Brian Cunningham, that's from Matt Levy talking about him knowing you. My buddy Brian Cunningham had a question about jiu-jitsu. Do you feel that the overwhelming trend towards leg locks is hurting the overall sport, or do you see it as a natural evolution that will ultimately facilitate growth? It's interesting. You and I did an interview a while ago in which you talked about the reality of competitive jiu-jitsu versus fighting, and you were talking about how, when somebody goes for leg locks, they're devoting 4 limbs to 1 limb, which, for a fight is impractical, but for a jiu-jitsu competition might be practical. Since you and I spoke, I think it was like 3 years ago now, I think there's been a lot of development in the sport, and now leg locks are being more widely accepted. I believe Gary Tonin has had a few more fights that he's finished by leg locks. What are your thoughts?
I mean, leg locks should have never been frowned upon. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to make somebody stop in a fight. I mean, how dare you go, well, yes, I tapped, but that's not a gentlemanly way to make me tap. Fuck off. If you tapped, you lost. I mean, I believe that cervical locks, neck cranks, all that shit should be legal. If a D1 college wrestler can make a jiu-jitsu guy stop by doing a can opener, then fucking learn how to defend a can opener, brother. Don't come out saying, well, that was not allowed. Oh, this guy does prison rules wrist locks. Learn how to defend a fucking wrist lock, brother. That shit makes me pop my head off. I mean, leg locks should have never been frowned on. That's just asinine, thinking it's ungentlemanly to attack below the waist. Fuck off, man. One of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu is we clap hands and you try and make me stop. You do anything you want. The only reason we allow blunt force trauma is because we want to wake up in the morning and be able to do it again. So we try to replicate the most accurate way that you can assess a man's ability to inflict violence on another that's repeatable daily. And that's what jiu-jitsu is. You extract those things that you can't repeat that would concuss you over time, and you leave everything else there. And that means toe holds, leg locks, fucking everything. The only thing that I frown upon, for example, would be small digit manipulation. The only reason is because it's not going to, it's just going to prevent me from training for a week. But if I have a rear naked choke on you and you think, well, I'm going to break his finger, it just means you're going to get choked unconscious by a guy with 9 fingers. It's not going to stop the fight. So in that regard, I'm not a big fan of attacking small joints. But other than that, everything goes, man. Leg locks, absolutely. I'm not a proponent of putting yourself. I'm a big proponent of jiu-jitsu being a zero-sum game. For example, I'm a big proponent of the more I advance position, the less options you have. In that regard, if we choose to go in a neutral leg lock situation, I would much more prefer it to be in a very controlled way, like a Kani Basami, those type of leg attacks where I have all the options you don't, and I have an exit strategy. I'm a big fan of entering into every position at the time of my choosing and under the circumstances of my choosing. That's why I'm a big proponent of passing guard, top game, being able to inflict all the damage and receive none. But anybody that frowns on leg locks doesn't fucking know leg locks, period. And you're afraid of something you don't know. And there's a lot of guys right now that are thinking, wait, do I start over and have to learn all this shit? Or is it easier just to say, let's ban it? Man, bullshit. If you really got into jiu-jitsu for the right reasons, then you should be training leg lock. 100%.
For sure, man. I agree 100%. You know, it's interesting. The IBJJF is now going to be allowing heel hooks and reaping for adult divisions, brown and black belts. Hopefully it goes to the masters divisions. Speaking of which, do you have any plans to compete ever again? I know that you competed back,
Yeah, I competed a lot back in the day. Here's the way I look at it. No, I'm not retired by any stretch. I would venture to say I'll compete in the future. I don't have any immediate plans to, but really what I've felt about when I was competing, my jiu-jitsu career was this. I mean, it was this. For example, if I hit an arm lock on somebody and they'd say, oh shit, Flanery, would you show me that setup? I'd be like, yeah, brother, after class, I'll show it to you. After class, I was fucking gone. You know what I mean? It's I had no interest in showing anybody how they lost. Now, as a teacher, it's this. And a lot of times, those tend to be relatively mutually exclusive. There's a handful of people that can do it extremely well. Cobrinha. I've never trained with Cobrinha, but a lot of my friends train with him, and apparently he's an amazing teacher. Also an amazing competitor and practitioner. But generally speaking, those are rare. Usually, when somebody is an amazing competitor, they tend to not be a great instructor. Phil Jackson was a good basketball player, arguably, one of the greatest coaches of all time. I really feel like that's true in some way. And at this point, I'm really trying to be the best instructor that I can. And, one of my favorite quotes, Einstein said, if you can't explain it with brevity and concision, simply and thoroughly, then you don't understand it. And a lot of my time right now is invested in the best conveyor of something that I find incredibly important that I possibly can.
That's awesome, man. That's a great answer. I do think that there's something to be said about people that can do both, and kind of one of my goals is to be able to do both. But for sure, I think that if you look at the majority of practitioners in the sport, it's one or the other. Now, I was going to kind of shift gears just a little bit. I know you recently have been doing a lot of commentary. You commentated at Third Coast and I believe Substars down in Miami. I believe. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. So, I used, when I was in LA, I used to commentate the Mundials, the Worlds, the Pans. But yeah, most recently, after moving away, miles away from the Pyramid in Long Beach. But I commentated Substars. Third Coast Grappling. Great events, man. Had a wonderful time.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I'm sure you heard about what happened with Substars, but Third Coast is really lighting the jiu-jitsu world on fire. What do you think of the different rule sets that are emerging? And what are your thoughts? Because I know when you were coming up, I believe, if I looked it up correctly, you were a blue belt back in 2003. So that means you've been around for a long time. You've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that you and I probably started around the same time originally, and there wasn't anything. There was, you either were doing a similar wrestling style rule set with submissions, or there was, the IBJJF, which has always kind of been nebulous. What do you think of the development of the sport aspect of the game? Do you think it's good or bad?
It depends on what your objective is and your mission statement. If you're trying to get viewership, I would have a very different business model. But at the end of the day, I think for me, we'll use UFC for an example. For me, as a viewer and a spectator and a fan, I want to see what would happen if two people entered a dark alley. I want to see who would come out of that alley. And rounds diffuse that reality a little bit. Stand-ups diffuse that reality a little bit. No strikes to a downed opponent diffuse that reality a little bit. For me, I would extract all of it. Depending on the rule set, everybody wants a W. Their objective is a W. They may say, oh, it's about the fans. I just want to give an accept. Bullshit. They want to win. They want to win. And if you don't try to game the system, then you're cheating yourself. So whatever the rules are, people are going to game the system. That's how the whole butt scoot, bottom entry, Kani Basami game started. Because they realized, okay, you can't get kicked from there. You can't get punched from there. So let's if the first person to get the party started really has the advantage. So that's why you have to see two people dropping to their butt and scooting at each other. And it definitely, for a viewer, I'll give you an example. Back, when I first did my first tournament, probably 99 or 2000, if you took your girlfriend, she was like, holy fuck, like, what are you doing? Those power Sinagis, just Ippons and, neon bellies from 2 feet away. You know what I mean? It's like, and now if you go to the IBJJF world, she's like, oh my God, that's so cute. What are they doing with their shirt? What is that when they, it just looks, it's a very different visual. It's a very different presentation. And a lot of the I know you're laughing, but it's kind of true. What's he doing? What's he doing with his foot when he's rapping? And he's like, what? It's just a very different presentation. And if you use the 5-year-old logic, a 5-year-old could watch tournament footage from the 90s and go, holy shit, you could get injured doing that. And a 5-year-old could watch an IBJJF tournament today, and it could, at some points, it could look rather patty cake. Now, we all know that it's not patty cake. And look, I'm not one of those guys that's like, my shit's for the streets, man. Sport jiu-jitsu. It's like, make no mistake, man. The Mayo brothers would fuck up anybody at a Chevron station that tried to steal their wallet. If anybody out there is saying sport jiu-jitsu, you can't defend yourself, bullshit. Let me tell you, Keenan Cornelius would fuck your shit up if you tried to pick on him. But at the end of the day, the way you look at these tournaments, one definitely looks closer to violent self-defense than the other.
For sure. But do you think that maybe it's the fact that it's become so refined? Because they call jiu-jitsu the gentle art. And part of the reason they call it that is that you can do it if you have an untrained or less trained opponent. You can go dead slow and still break their shit off. Right? That's just reality.
Yeah.
I can go at 50% speed and still break you, right? Like, not you, but still break an opponent that is lesser than me.
100%. That's 100%. But it depends on what you mean by refinement. And I'll give you an example. Yes, it is refined. And there are so many specialists out there, going back to what I was saying, that are taking advantage of a rule set. But make no mistake, if you take a sport jiu-jitsu academy guy and an old school fighting jiu-jitsu academy guy, and they compete under the IBJJF rule set, well, certainly the IBJJF guy is going to win. And I'll tell you why, because old school jiu-jitsu always takes into consideration blunt force trauma. The way you escape side control, for an example, if your forearm is in front of the face, if you do this to escape side control, then you can get kneed in the head. If this elbow is not on the hip and I'm using skeletal structure to keep that knee from hitting me in the head, and that makes escaping very difficult. And it's a very long learn. But you will get out without receiving a concussion, potentially. But if you disallow that, then certainly I can apply more levers in dangerous positions because I know legally they can't take advantage of the dangerous position. So yes, it has been refined within that rule set. So when you train jiu-jitsu, it depends on your mission statement, and there is no right or wrong. I have plenty of students that say, man, I just want to do tournaments. I've never been in a fight in my life. I don't in anticipation of ever getting a fight, and I'm very forthcoming. I say, then this is probably not the academy for you, because we are an old school self-defense fighting type of jiu-jitsu. That's what I teach. That's where my heart is. But I'm very forthcoming. For example, if you try to sweep people with 4 limbs using your legs and your arms, that's 4 limbs of leverage, but you're neglecting to protect your face. Old school jiu-jitsu always takes that into consideration. So it totally depends. I mean, what if sport jiu-jitsu came around first and then they started thinking? Then we'd be having the inverse conversation. What do you think of the evolution where it's really, we've taken away all these high leverage sweeps and we've reduced the leverage to tilt your opponent over, but we've protected our lifespan? Then you'd look at refinement going in that direction. And I appreciate both. I think there are some amazing tactical elements of sport jiu-jitsu that have come around with high leverage. And I appreciate those. It's not my mission statement, but I appreciate every aspect of jiu-jitsu. And I appreciate that people will pick and pull from both sides and make them combined wonderful martial art.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. It's funny. The old school versus new school argument always makes me chuckle. Like I was watching a video yesterday of some of the old Gracie challenges, and it came up on one of the groups that I was in, and I think that they had Fabio Santos, they had the Gracies, I think they had they hoisted a match in there, Hoyler maybe, and the very last video in the little series was this little wrestler guy against one of the smaller Gracies. And the wrestler looked a little bit bigger, but not by much. And man, he gave the Gracie fits. Like he eventually got caught in an armbar, but the fact that he was a trained grappler versus completely untrained, like these other karate guys that were coming in and trying to throw chi punches, it was a very different kind of match. And I was imagining to myself, if you took a, competitive purple belt from 2020 and you just picked him up and dropped him in that room, what do you think would happen?
It'd be over in a heartbeat. And that's just it. Even if you're talking about old school fighting jiu-jitsu, the mechanics of a basic arm lock from close guard, those mechanics that have been refined and developed far surpass the basic arm lock from close guard that we all learned in the 90s. I mean, the refinement of even the things that we still leave in old school fighting jiu-jitsu are incomparable 30 years later. I mean, the difference in every one of those very fundamental positions, something as basic as the basic triangle from close guard. I mean, Ryan Hall's triangle would blow away any Gracie's triangle from the 90s. And to not acknowledge that is just admitted stupidity. I mean, the sport is evolving daily. There are some amazing minds out there that have spent a lot of time to look at the places of leverage, the mechanical advantage, the place of harm, the place of safety, the weight distribution. And to act like what came to the States in '93 is as effective in that definition as today is just sheer nonsense. It has been refined and developed, and I would expect jiu-jitsu in 2030 to be able to laugh at 2021 jiu-jitsu.
For sure, man. I mean, it's amazing to see, just in the time that I've been in the sport, watching the development. Like initially, the meta when I started competing was the berimbolo, because I started competing around 2011, and now it's, the meta is going to wrestling. Interestingly enough, for a while it was leg locks, but it seems like people have started to catch on to leg locks, and you're seeing more and more. I look at what the Brazilians are doing, because they seem like they're the ones that are trying to constantly, change the rules like you were talking about to make it so they can still win. And then when they start to catch up with something, that's when the next meta starts to hit.
Yeah. In my opinion, it should be you guys shake hands. You can't punch each other, but anything else goes. And let's see who has to stop. That should be the rule set to me. And I know it wouldn't make for the most exciting visual, because some of those matches could go on for an hour, but that's really the most honest assessment of who would come out on top. Is say,
for sure,
you can do spine locks, cervicals, legs, ankles, any of that. It's free. Knees, hips, let it go.
That being said, though, having commentated and having been around the game for a while, and also on the same token, being a person that understands how to make things look a certain way because your background as a stunt coordinator, what rule set do you think gives the best visual presentation? Or is there one that can?
Well, I mean, look, I don't think anytime, look, everybody goes into a match. And, so many people, it's another debate. Like anytime a jiu-jitsu match and somebody goes, yeah, I had 3 fights. They weren't fights, they were jiu-jitsu matches. Well, it's becoming more and more true, especially whenever you take your kid to see and 2 guys drop to their butt and start spider walking towards each other. Then yes, it does. So yes, I mean, if we looked at that, if you put that in a movie, the crowd would fucking laugh. They'd laugh their ass off. If a guy broke into a dude's house and the dude got out of bed, dropped to his butt, and started spider walking towards the criminal, the audience would get up and leave. And that should be taken into consideration. Yes, I don't think that's very. It doesn't lend itself to us trying to ascertain who is the best fighter or a metaphor for a fighter. And in turn, it doesn't make the best visual. So I think any rule set would have to involve takedowns, high amplitude throws, things that put your opponent on the ground with the least amount of ability to defend once it gets to the ground. It's the whole no slamming rule. I mean, if a guy can pick you up, he deserves to be able to slam your ass. If there are things that are going around on the internet. The guy has the MMA match where the guy has him in a triangle. The guy picks him up and slams him 19 times. It's like, that guy's spine is going, could a brother hook a leg, please? Could a brother just hook a? It's like, that's shit we learned in 101. You know what I mean? It's just, if you get slammed 9 times from a triangle.
Hey, he did finish that triangle, though.
I know. Holy shit. The dude's going to piss and blood for 2 weeks. He could have finished it. I know he won, but he could have done it with no slams. There's no reason he should have ever been picked up. Remember Paulo Field, or back in the Pride days, picked up, who was it? Rampage picked up.
Ricardo Arona.
Ricardo Arona. Yeah, and even then I'm like, brother, just hook his leg. Hook his leg. Turn your angle on the truck. Now, granted, that's not a Monday morning cornerback. Ricardo Arona would fuck my shit up. Ricardo, if you're out there, you can beat my ass. But, even Ricardo Arona, I'm sure once it happened once, he'd have hooked the leg. But, fundamental elements like that you're like, man, if you do it, you don't know, you deserve to get slammed. That would stop everything. No one would hold on to an elevated triangle then. It's up to you. It's like it's like when somebody gets a rear naked choke across the face, And then they end up going, well, man, you broke my nose. Well, it could have stopped by that. We could have stopped at any time. What's the difference between you tapping to a choke and you tapping because you say, I don't want you to destroy my nose? It's the same thing. I don't know why we've cultured ourselves to say that tapping to a rear naked across my brow line is so ungentlemanly. If a dude gets his forearm across your nose and sinks in, then tap. Don't wait till it breaks and go, yeah, but it wasn't a choke. I mean, you actually hurt my nose. Fuck off. That's what the sport is. And you know what it'll teach you to do? It'll teach you to tap or unbase your opponent to where they cannot do that. If you have a triangle and you get lifted, fucking let it go. You know why you got slammed? Because either you didn't protect against the stand-up or you held on to it to where you were 6 feet off the ground.
Yeah. I like the fight to win rule where they award 1 point for each slam.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I mean, that's beautiful. I love that shit.
So the way Fight to Win does it now, shout out Seth Daniels, who's a BCTL alum. You know, what they do is they have this stage. Have you ever seen the Fight to Win show?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so they have this raised stage. It's like when you get slammed on, it doesn't feel like anything. It feels like you jumped on your bed, right? Like it's not a painful. It doesn't. You're very unlikely to be concussed by getting slammed on there.
Yeah.
But that's right, Brian. That's fucking right. Anyways, it's the way it works. Yeah, I mean we focus more on catch wrestling. We do a lot of. So I'm sure you're familiar with catch wrestling. Catch wrestling kind of throws all that shit out the window. But
if something hurts to the point of making you stop, then stop. You know, you're doing yourself a disservice if you train any other way. If you're mounted and somebody is leaning his elbow on your face and you don't train mount escapes by unbasing your opponent to where they can't lean on your face, then you're fucked should you ever really have to escape a mount where somebody's throwing damaging blows. It's, you know, the age-old adage, you're going to do in a high-stress, duress situation what you do every day. And again, but if you train that way, then you're wasting reps within the skill set, within the rule set that says you can't throw blows. So it's a mission statement issue. It's a mission statement issue. What are you trying to achieve?
Well, I feel like a good answer to that is using rips and grinds like from catch wrestling. Like what I'll do if I get to a position and my partner is balling up, I'm not going to strike them, but I'm going to give them a little massage with my elbow where it doesn't feel good. Like I'm not going to, I'm not going to drop it in hard because I don't want to break something on my training partner, but I'll take my elbow, I'll take my shoulder and I'll grind it on them until they open up enough for me to do something.
Well, that's just what it is. You want to take it right up to the place of causing destruction. You don't want your training partner, because for you to get better, he's got to show up tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Yeah. So you can't break him, but you have to only pull out those things of your training that would prevent him from showing up tomorrow. You want to do everything else. And that's one of the reasons that jiu-jitsu practitioners can get so fucking good, is because you can go 100%. All other striking arts have a little bit of theory. You can go hard, but I tell you, I can't train defending low kicks with Edson Barbosa if I say, Edson, throw as hard as you can. You can't do it. You would have an ACL damage at the first. Exactly. So there's a limited amount of time you can train at 100%. But jiu-jitsu, you can't. You can do it 100%.
Now, we were talking a little bit about the dichotomy between the instructor and the competitor. We had another question from Steffi Schmidt, who's actually watching, I believe. Steffi was asking, what do you want to be remembered for as a BJJ artist / teacher? So like if you could, 50 years from now when, we're probably both gone from this earth, if you could choose what people remember you for in the art of jiu-jitsu, what would it be?
More so as a teacher, as the ability to quickly, efficiently, articulately convey a very special type of information. it's a very complex martial art that I think, it's hard to believe, but we're still in the infancy of jiu-jitsu. Wrestling's been around for so many years that the amount of things that are being refined in wrestling now are microscopic. The NCAA championships are still won by the fundamentals, the ankle picks, the blast doubles, the swing singles, everything it's the evolution has been slowed to a crawl. Jiu-jitsu, not so much. And whereas when I was coming up, jiu-jitsu was being taught by people that were good at it. We didn't really have yet people that were good at teaching it. And I think the skill sets are very, very different. I'd love to be remembered as somebody that could convey a very rare type of information quickly and efficiently. And the style that is close to my heart, that I fear is kind of being lost. And I'd
awesome,
like to be one. I'd like to be one of the preservers of that rare martial art, that Rickson Gracie Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
For sure. It's funny you say Rickson Gracie Renzo Gracie. Very different styles.
Very, very different styles. Very different styles.
Like all around, different people. Like they're such different humans. I know you've trained with both of them. Did you find that one teaching style resonated differently with you than the other, or because they're both great instructors and great people that you're able to get from both?
What I've learned coming up is there's all types of learners. There's visual learners, tactile learners. There's sensory learners. There's some instructors that walk onto the mat and they give you details. They say put your foot here, rotate it 30 degrees. Point your elbow to the sky, then hip escape to the left. And then there's instructors that give you a concept. If you understand the concept, say of a mount escape. If you say the 4-point base, if somebody is mounted on you, their legs, their weight distribution is divided. If their hands aren't on the mat, their weight distribution is divided between 2 knees and 2 feet. If their hands are on the mat, then it's usually 2 knees and 2 hands. Well, if you understand the table concept, if I block one side hand and one side knee and I push it, it will fall over. As long as you understand that concept, there are a myriad of different ways you can teach the trap and roll, as long as you understand that concept. If you teach in detail, then somebody may think, I need to get a pocket grip on a sleeve. And as soon as they don't wear a sleeve, you think, that escape no longer works. Now, of course, the escape works if you understand the concept. So, it's taught me a very different way of approaching conveying information, and not only teaching jiu-jitsu, but teaching people to self-teach. And I think that is a very important aspect in knowledge and skill acquisition.
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely agree with that, without a question. So. Oh, here we go. We got another question from Courtney Smith Brees. Sean Patrick Flanery, you have trained with the best of the best. What is the best BJJ advice you have received for your journey in this art?
I've received advice from so many people.
I know it's like a vague question, it's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, it's probably the best piece of advice I ever got was when Rickson threw me a gi and he said, "Put the gi, tonight you're gonna train." And that was the first time that I trained, when he threw a gi at me. And it was a loner gi, and I'd never trained before. And I put a gi on, and I'd always wanted to train jiu-jitsu. And I rolled that night with Henry Aiken's little brother, Matt Aikens. And he proceeded to treat me like a 5-year-old child, helpless child. And the clouds parted, and the martial arts sky was exposed, and I never looked back. That's probably the best piece of advice I was ever given, is there's a road, go down that road.
Yeah, for sure, man. You said you moved to Houston about 3 years ago,
I think, yeah, 4 years ago.
and I mean, I know. Again, it's been a while since we spoke, but you spent quite a bit of your life in Texas, anyways. But recently, in the last few years, the Texas jiu-jitsu scene has been exploding. You've got Third Coast that's been doing a lot of events down there. You got Fight to Win was setting up camp in Austin and in Dallas, and I believe in Houston, just doing shows every night. And then there's a bunch of really tough competitors now coming out of Texas. As part of the Texas jiu-jitsu scene, have you seen this development? Have you seen this growth as, as something that's become apparent to you from where you are standing?
Yeah, I mean, look, the explosion of jiu-jitsu and kind of the discovery of jiu-jitsu. Look, you said you and I started about the same time. If you started in the 90s, we're now what's considered early adopters. And when we started, I would assume you thought the same thing I did. Why the fuck didn't I do this sooner? It's like the minute I found jiu-jitsu, I wish I'd found it when it first came to the States in '93. Or when Horian first came around in the fucking '80s. I mean, it's now there's pros and cons with any of that. Now there's at least in LA, there's a jiu-jitsu academy on every fucking corner. The beautiful thing about LA is it's a world champion on every fucking corner. It's and around the world. Now, when I travel, I never leave home without a gi and a belt and no gi training stuff. And the first thing I do is I Google around me, who's here, who's around, who can I train with? And when I first did that, there was one that would come up and it was a 45-minute drive. Now there's one, whatever hotel I'm staying at, there's one within walking distance. It's not just Texas. It's everywhere. And there's pros and there's cons that come with that, but there's nothing wrong with our martial art starting to take a front seat in the entire martial art world. There's nothing wrong with it. There's only good that can come out of it.
Now, what do you think are the cons of it? I mean, you said there are pros and cons. What are the cons? I mean, we all know what the pros are, but I don't know what the cons are.
Well, I mean, the cons are what's obvious. What happened to Taekwondo, karate? Now you go to next door to the Piggly Wiggly, you go next door to Kroger, and there's some morbidly obese guy trying to teach kicks that can't lift his leg over his waistline to save his fucking life. And you have people literally in these strip mall McDojos that are letting kids go to the playground thinking that they are lethal. And if anybody disagrees that that's happening, you're full of fucking shit. And if anybody doesn't see this eventually happening to jiu-jitsu, you're not looking far enough ahead in the future. That if we continue on this path, you're going to see a very benign version of jiu-jitsu that is being adopted because parents want their kid to be safe on a playground. And you have academies that don't even teach takedowns. You know that. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. If you learn a skill set, but an area of the fight game in which you were incredibly lethal, but you can't take the fight there, fucking shame on you. I don't give a fuck how lethal your ground game is. If you can't unilaterally take the fight into that arena, you might as well have never trained it. And that is a potential future for this martial art. And I'm not saying it's going to be pervasive. I mean, there are still Taekwondo academies that are fucking brutal and lethal, but they've become more and more rare. And same thing with karate. There's some Kyokushin karate places that'll leave you with fractures, but they're becoming more and more rare. And I would assume that's going to be the trajectory of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I feel like the fact that there is such a culture around the competition in the sport, I think that that's what's going to keep it safe. I think the fact that, it's very clear who is and is not a world champion, or who is or is not a, competitive, who does or does not have competitive achievements. That's the reason that I almost feel like your point about the instructor or the competitor is never really going to take entire hold in jiu-jitsu. You're not going to see a prevalence of instructors that have never competed, because that's how they establish themselves as being legitimate, and then they shift their focus to teaching. Or some
Well,
do at the same time.
I'll tell you. I think you're correct right now, because right now people Google and they want to see who has 17 world championships, which nobody does at this point, but that's what they want to see. But right now, I'll tell you, some of the most prolific instructors in my life have been people you've never heard of. And I know that absolutely. I've trained with world champions who finished me in 60 seconds, but they could not teach me how to stay alive longer than 60 seconds. I've trained with people that could teach me in 60 seconds, who could finish me in 60 seconds, who I felt like I could teach them how to finish me in 45 seconds. I've experienced that. I think the next evolution will be, and for that reason, because jiu-jitsu is in its infancy, so people are searching for world champions. Nobody gives a shit. If somebody said, hey, I'm going to play basketball, I either get to play under Michael Jordan or Phil Jackson, they're picking Phil Jackson, because he has a track record of being able to take what he knows and put it in somebody that knows nothing and turn them into a Michael Jordan. Did I say Jackson? I think I said Jackson. A Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? I think in the future, you're going to find that there is a separation between the two. And I think right now, people want to train with somebody who has achieved it. Later in the life of jiu-jitsu, people are going to want to train with somebody that can teach world champions. And sometimes they are the same, but sometimes they're not. I'm in Toronto right now. And when I was in Vancouver, I had an instructor named Tim Shears, and he was one belt ahead of me. And we had battles on the mat, but that dude could teach me. You probably never heard of the dude. His name is Tim Shears. Tim, if you're out there, what's up, brother? Phil Cardella is a Helson black belt. You may or may not have ever heard of him. An amazing instructor. Some of these guys, Henry Akins, who's never won a black belt world championship, that guy is an incredible teacher. Yeah. And there's a very big difference between somebody that can do and somebody that can teach. Sometimes the same person occupies both, but I've found that to not always be the case.
Yeah, sure. Sean Williams, I mean, he's got some competitive achievements. John Danaher.
But he's an amazing John Danaher. Yeah, exactly. To what you're saying. Right now, John Danaher is widely regarded as the best jiu-jitsu instructor on the planet. He's never done a tournament. And I wouldn't disagree with that. That guy is a jiu-jitsu supercomputer. But he's also studied the pedagogy of learning and scaffolding information. And I think that is incredibly rare, and it hasn't been explored yet. So back to what I want to be remembered for, I want to be remembered for somebody that has curated that information and found a very concise way to put it in an unskilled individual.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. Now, if, let's say Third Coast, because that's an organization that we are both familiar with and that you've done some announcing for. If Third Coast were to say, hey, Sean, we want to set you up with a match, pick an opponent, we're going to make it happen. Any rule set, any opponent. Who would you pick?
I mean, shit. I'd pick. I would 100%. I'd pick a world champion. I wouldn't go into it wanting to display a victory for me. I'd use it as an opportunity to train with somebody who I think has some things that I've never seen before. Somebody that can do things to me that's never been done before. I would pick somebody amazing. I wouldn't run from it, but I wouldn't pick somebody that I know I could beat. I would. My goal would be to stay alive as long as possible. I'd pick somebody, that's at the top of their game. Now, granted, somebody at the top of their game has, nothing to gain and everything to lose, so that'd be a hard match to sell. But if it was up to me, if you said you can roll with anybody out there, it would be to roll with one of those guys. It'd be to roll with, Ryan Hall, and to see his very different leg lock entries. Like now he's got a 50-50 style entry, and Gary Tonin, who's got a Kami Basami type of entry, and as well as a top scary game. It'd be to go and a guillotine that'll pop your head off. It'd be to go with one of those guys that are incredibly skilled and somewhat in my weight department.
Yeah, man, that's it's always fun for me picking, or not picking, but kind of making wish lists of opponents. I'm always looking for people that I could, in theory, beat, but that I'm not guaranteed to beat. Like those are the matches that I want.
Yeah, I'd love to have a match with like a BJ Penn or somebody like that. You know what I mean? It's
awesome.
That'd be great, man. It'd be an honor. I mean, I have so many out there. At the end of the day, I'm a practitioner, but I'm also a fan. I love this martial art, and there are so many amazing competitors out there. If it ever happened, it wouldn't come from a place of ego. It would come from a place of love and exchanging technique and ideas. And I wouldn't want anybody to come in soft and lay down. I'd want somebody to try and pop my head off.
For sure, man. Now, we had another question from Christina Allison. Christina was asking about your boys and the wonderful achievements that they've made recently in BJJ and wrestling. Tell us a little bit about that. I know that you're probably very proud of your sons.
Yeah, it's I mean, obviously, at the point in my life, my goal is to make my wife and my boys proud and happy. That's my sole focus in my life. And last year, my older son won the Texas State Wrestling Championship. So he's a state champion. And this year, my youngest son just won the Houston Nationals in wrestling. They both wrestle and compete in jiu-jitsu all the time. They're little mat rats, and they love it. But, we're not trying to solely focus on that. It's about to be March, April, so swim team season's going to start. We do swimming. We do wrestling. My oldest son just had his first year in football. So they're boys, they're kids. We love competing and learning new things. But at my house, self-defense is not an elective. It's a life skill, just like math, reading and writing and arithmetic. You're going to learn how to defend yourself, just like swimming. You're going to learn how to swim. I'm never going to put a child out in the world that can't tread water. And self-defense is the same way. They don't have to play basketball if they don't want, but they're going to learn self-defense. They don't have to do tournaments if they don't want, but they're going to learn self-defense. They don't have to be on a swim team and do swim meets, but they're going to have a command of water. And that's how we look at it at my household. But they're both champions in their own right, man. And I couldn't be more proud of my boys. It's a pleasure to be their dad and their instructor.
That's awesome, man. It was interesting. Christina just posted a comment on here. It was a quote that when I saw it, I sent it around to my entire family that doesn't train and that doesn't train their kids. And the quote was, "Never rely on the charity of the bully to not get your lunch money stolen." And the other one that I really liked from you was the no, when you say no, it shouldn't be a hope. I think I see. I might be paraphrasing.
Yeah, well, I think when I posted it, my intention is I train my kids jiu-jitsu because I want their no to contain more than just hope. Right, when my son says no, I want it to be backed with the ability to insist on a no. And I know that if I had this technical ability when I was in elementary and junior high school and high school, it would have solved so many problems. Like I say, nothing makes walking away from a fight easier than knowing you don't fucking have to. And I want my boys to walk through life like that, saying, I don't want to take my watch off and go to blows, but I know if I have to, I've done it 5 days a week for the last 20 years of my life. And this person probably hasn't. So the odds of him besting me at this game is slim to fucking nil. And whenever you've done it for that long, you can truly look at it that objectively. It's not an emotion like, what you want to, it's a, I don't want to do this. I mean, I will if I have to, but I don't want to break my watch. Let me take my watch off. Keep my chicken fingers warm, will you? Okay, let's go outside. It'll get broken up in here. Let's go outside. You know, it's that, you know, when you spend 7 days a week learning how to strangle another man for 20 years, and you've learned it for 20 years against people that are simultaneously learning how to defend against it, what do you think the odds are of somebody besting you at that contest? They're slim to fucking nil. Pretty low. I'm not saying it's not possible, but pretty fucking low. Pretty low. It's like me entering into a math game with an MIT PhD. It's just, I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'd probably fucking lose.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's an important point for anybody that might be watching this that is, you know, not familiar with jiu-jitsu, because it's such an important skill set. It's a skill set that if you have it, it's really hard. Do you need to take that?
Deny.
Awesome.
Hold on, watch this 1 second. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I was going to answer it, but then it went on these, and I thought maybe it'd probably go through the system. Anyway,
it's fine. It's fine. So, anyways, so back to the movie. Which outlets are people going to be able to check the movie out on, and what's the timeline for it? I know it comes out next Friday.
Comes out next Friday. Comes out Friday. It's coming to select theaters, so check your local listings. And it also comes to all streaming platforms where you can rent movies. So like On Demand, Apple TV, you know, it's available anywhere you can rent movies. So, you know, I hope you guys give it a chance. And please, if you do watch it, shoot me a Facebook message or an Instagram message. I you know, whatever the common thought is out there that people have, actors, people operate their social media. Maybe that's the case for like A and B listers, but I'm like alphanumerically way down there. I operate my own. So shoot me a Facebook message, man. Let me know your thoughts, please. And like I said, any other film, it matters to me, but less so with this, because this came from my heart. And it truly is my love letter to one of the most monumental things I've ever discovered in my life, and that's this art of jiu-jitsu. Christina Allison's asking if it's going to be on Amazon Prime. You'll have to check individually the individual streaming services. I don't know. I wish I had an answer for you. Now, do you have any other work in the works right now that you want to talk about? Yes. Well, no, not that I specifically want to talk about, but I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a secret or not, but right now I'm in Toronto. I'm in quarantine. I'm in Toronto to film for a show that happens to be on Amazon Prime. And it happens to be about superheroes. Oh. And I happen to be a superhero, which is kind of cool. So that's what I'm up here in quarantine to film. Are you going to be in the next season of The Boys? I can't answer that, brother. I think it's supposed to be on the DL, but I may have busted it just right here. But I'll leave that up to y'all to discover. And I hate to say this, brother, but I gotta call. That is actually my wife calling. And there's a lot. You are important, but my wife. No, I totally understand, man. I was actually going to say, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. For anyone that wants to find Sean on Instagram, it's at SP Flanery. That's with one N. And thank you so much for joining me, man. I hope we can do this again at some point. No, Emil, you're a stud, and I appreciate the time, brother. Thank you, and I'll send you the more information when I'm done with the article and everything. Have a great day. You got it. God bless, guys.